Hey, everybody. I'm here with my friend Omar, the Tilted Lawyer, and we're here to talk about James Scott, who had his parole hearing today. I believe it must be done by now because Adam was going into the prison to do the hearing with him several hours ago. So we won't obviously have an answer for a while. It takes at least weeks to hear back usually. And we'll, eventually have Adam back to follow up on what happened today and what he can tell us about the process. But there are a couple things since we last sat down and talked about this that transpired that I wanted to get Omar's thoughts on because one of the local newspapers actually saw his podcast and took it to one of the investigators from James's case who had some criticisms of the idea that James may have been a scapegoat. And I will pull that up in just a second. But first, I want to show you guys this photo of Adam. Hang on. He was out there in Missouri, Jefferson City, Missouri.
Why you got his backside
photos
for?
From yesterday. I don't know. It's supposed to be artsy.
That's not artsy at all. It's just like, hey, before you take this picture, let me make this phone call, and then you snap the picture anyway.
Well, I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, anyway. Not like you took the picture. I'm just saying.
No, I'm actually not stalking anyone.
No.
But also they announced
Today.
that they're going to be making 2 days ago, they announced in this article that they're going to be making a film out of Adam's book called An Act of God, which is about James Scott's story. So that's going to be pretty cool. They'll get it on the big screen. And Blake Babson from Third Coast Films, the guy who was in the interview I did with Adam when I posted last week, he's the one who's going to be, kind of spearheading this. So I thought that was cool. But let's go over to this article in a sec. Okay. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I was actually did not want to say anything.
Okay.
Well, I do want to say things. I just I'm waiting for the opportune time. How about that?
Okay. All right. Let's see. Sorry, I'm gonna zoom in on this a little so it's easier for people to read who are watching the screen.
Yeah. I mean, specifically about the people, the investigators that are upset at the audacity of people to point out deficiencies in the ways that they tried the case against James Scott. And I mean, before I even get started, I want to let you run through your outline or your paces or whatever. Because
I'm just going to go through the article with you. So.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, okay. So this was written by Michelle McCormack, and I saw it was also posted on Facebook where some of the officers had some comments to make, but we'll get to that in a second. So she has a little video here, which we'll play, but let me read a little bit of it first. It says, 2 men who have known Scott at different stages of his life and have been directly involved in his criminal case have very different views on who Scott is and what would happen if he were released. Okay. Retired investigator John McCoy of the Adams County Sheriff's Office, which is weird because the Afro Man thing was also Adams County Sheriff's Office, didn't snag an invite to the parole hearing. I personally investigated that one, spent a lot of trial time at the seat of witness stand, been so far gone, maybe they forgot about me, McCoy said in an interview with Muddy River News on Tuesday. On the other side is Adam Pitlock, who will be sitting next to Scott during the parole hearing. I came into this as a journalist, not an advocate, Pitlock told the Tilted Lawyer podcast this week. If he were guilty, I would have bolted a long time ago. I can't find guilt. Okay.
Yeah, he did say that.
Did that reporter ever reach out to you at all?
No, they just took it straight off the stream, which, you know what, I don't mind because, I mean, it was out there. Yeah, it was an interview with Adam. I mean, I don't mind them doing that.
Yeah. I know that they didn't reach out to him either to get his thoughts, which I think he would have appreciated. But let's see what this guy says here.
But if you want, I mean, we sat there and talked with him for an hour. And
what's that?
And no, I was saying he sat and talked with us for an hour. I mean, you were there, and we went pretty comprehensively through the case. And he stated that was kind of the throwaway introduction to all of the reasons why he thought that there was no guilt in James Scott. And so if anybody was interested or, wanted to go beyond headlines, all they had to do, sit there and watch the podcast. It was an hour long. We hit like a dozen different evidentiary points about why James Scott is probably a scapegoat. Why it makes absolutely no scientific or logical sense why he would be the one person responsible for the failure of 1,038 levees. And the Great Flood. It was a flood, the Great Flood of 1993, It wasn't James Scott responsible for the murders, and that's the thing. Like, the thing that he's convicted of is somehow manipulating the levees into this catastrophic failure. The levee failure itself is not the thing responsible for the deaths. It was the flood.
Right.
The infrastructure was supposed to be in place to prevent those things. And the infrastructure was maintained and serviced by thousands of people, government agencies. And so I think the general, and before I go on a rant, like the overarching theme is that there is probably hundreds of people that could be logically implicated in the levee's failure. And they're pinning it on a 24-year-old James Scott that made an offhanded joke about his wife to a 16-year-old at a party saying, hey, if there's a flood, then I can stay and party for a little bit longer. Like, something that any kid would say, or just a stupid thing that you would say. And on the basis of that,
wife too. Like, he drove states away to cross over a safe bridge and get her and bring her home. So it's not like he actually stayed away from his wife and partied anyways.
Well, yeah,
true. So.
I mean, it makes no logical sense. The timing of everything, the way that they were surveilling the levees, like they were literally aerial surveilling the levees prior to the failure, because they knew there was probably a structural thing that was going to happen. And then 1,038 levees fail, and then all the death and destruction. There was expert witnesses that were prepared to testify as to the culprit of the levee's failings that did not involve James Scott. And then the judge incorrectly applied hearsay to his testimony, saying because he wasn't there for whatever, then whatever he would have to say would be hearsay, which would be true to a layperson, except he was an expert. And that was never the basis of an appeal. And we kind of discussed that on the show, and he kind of blew his opportunity to appeal on that basis anyway. So here we are, it's 33 years later, and this is his first parole hearing. And then he told us that I think the first one was supposed to occur back in like 2017 or 9 years ago, I think is what he said. And then it somehow got kicked down the road to the point where this is the very first. He's lost his mom. He's lost his father. He obviously lost his wife. He doesn't have any family. And the only person representing him in this morning's parole hearing was Adam himself at his request, which he was more than willing to do. And so, sorry for going on a rant, but I had...
Well, that's what we're here for. You're supposed to be going
I had that locked and loaded. I got a lot on my mind with this case is all.
It says here at the bottom, the crux of Pitlock's argument is the lack of physical evidence and a court ruling at trial that scientific evidence is hearsay, which is a lot of what you just said. But this lack of physical evidence, I think if there's a lack of physical evidence, it should be very difficult to put someone away, for life.
Yeah.
And that's obviously what bothers me a lot about this is like a lot of it seems to be based on their feelings about him because of his past, which admittedly is not great. He's admitted that he's done some things that are not good. Like he had those arsons when he was a teenager. I think there was another charge at one point. I can't recall, but he had been in the system before. The police were familiar with him from before, and it was easy to kind of see him as a troublemaker. And so if he had been squeaky clean, then he wouldn't be a very good fall guy, is the thing. So on the one hand, it's like, I guess to an extent, I understand people being suspicious, but on the other hand, it's like, it's kind of the perfect storm, and I feel like feelings about somebody and the things they've done in the past are not a good reason to keep them behind bars for life if there's no physical evidence to go along with that.
Well, it's not just the physical evidence, but whenever you have a catastrophic failure of these proportions, like I go back to the fires that just happened in the Palisades a few years back in LA County. And the reason why those fires were so out of hand, I mean, number one, there was a lot of things that went wrong. But one of the things that went wrong was there was a specific part that was installed sometime in like the 1910s or 1920s. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to be replaced like every 30 years or so. It had a shelf life of approximately 30 years, meaning it was due or scheduled for a maintenance or a replacement part sometime in the 60s. And I'm going off of just rote memory because I don't have all the facts, but it was something to that effect where at some point, like in the 50s or 60s, the part was supposed to be replaced and they just kind of overlooked it and just left it alone. And the part continues to hold up until it doesn't. Sometime in the 2020s, the thing snaps and it sparks what became the Palisades fire, which decimated homes of hundreds, led to hundreds of deaths. Thousands of families were displaced, and they're still paying for the wreckage of that disaster. Now you juxtapose that with this, the flood of 93. You have 1,038 levees that are designed to deal with something like the Great Flood of 1993. And you said that you were going to have footage of 1993 from the flood. And so we'll take a look at that.
Oh, I'm going to save it for next time because I started to look at it and I didn't get to organize it, unfortunately.
Oh, well, next time then. But yeah, there was a flood and there were levees. They were supposed to be able to hold up and protect the people, the residents of their community from a flood. 1,038 of the levees failed. And to pin that on a 24-year-old with a questionable background at the time and say that he is responsible for the 1,038 levees failing, causing all of this destruction, and give him life imprisonment for it, you got to wonder what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, there was a prior conviction, I think, like, what did Adam say? Like back in 1995, I think is what he said. They had this case, they tried him and convicted him, and the case was thrown out for prosecutorial misconduct because the prosecutor was hiding evidence. And then they retry him, and they didn't go prosecutorial misconduct this other route, but they played these funny games with expert witnesses. Now, look, one of the things that experts are supposed to be able to do is they're supposed to be given all of the relevant evidence. They're allowed to rely on and evaluate and examine the reasoning of other experts, of which there were a couple, and they weren't nearly as qualified as the experts that were going to testify contrary to the findings. But they're allowed to hear their testimony. They're allowed to see their reports. They're allowed to examine the evidence that led them to their conclusions and give their own expert opinion. But when those other experts were testifying, this particular expert was excluded, wasn't allowed to be in the courtroom when it happened. And then when he was preparing to give his opinions on the failures of the levees, they deemed his testimony incorrectly as hearsay. Mm-hmm. And it never got in. There were people with financial incentives to pin this on James Scott. There were people with a financial interest in terms of what they could recover from insurance companies, insurance company payouts if James Scott was implicated. And when he was, the insurance money came through and they built brand new homes as a result of it. Mm-hmm. And now, look, there's a whole, I saw some comments after our last stream from people from Missouri that said, yeah, I'm glad James Scott, I'm glad they found him guilty. I hope he never gets out. That's the job of a scapegoat, right? He was the patsy. He was the person that you could pin this on that nobody would think twice about. And look, when it comes to stuff like that, sometimes in law, people just want somebody to blame. And James Scott was an easy target. And when you have hundreds of people conspiring against him, where they come to the conclusion, look, if James Scott goes away, then all the rest of us are safe. That's what it appears happened to Mr. Scott.
Right.
They tried him twice. They convicted him twice. The first conviction was thrown out. The second one stuck. The appeals process played out, and they never tested the veracity of the judge's decision to exclude expert testimony that would have necessarily exculpated, made him look more. I can't talk. That would have pinned the blame on others other than James Scott. That's why we're here. That's what got our attention. It's the reason why we're doing now our second live stream on this. It's the reason why we're covering this on this day of his first parole hearing that was originally supposed to happen 9 years ago. And that's why we're here.
Mm-hmm. And the doctor that you noted that was, the judge ruled in hearsay, wouldn't let him in the courtroom, wouldn't let him testify in front of the jury. So I guess he did give his testimony, but the jury wasn't allowed to hear it.
Right.
Dr. Hammer, according to this article, is still incensed over the implication that his conclusions weren't reliable because he wasn't at the levee in person. Hammer maintains the levee was bound to fail given the historic proportions of the flood, often referred to as a 500-year flood. He also said Scott would not have been able to outrun the release of water if he had compromised the levee. And Dr. Hammer, I'd be pissed too at this because all the experts in all these big cases that you see all the time that are getting all this traction online, the experts weren't there. when psychiatric experts come in, they weren't there to witness what happened or what that person was feeling and their state of mind at the time. They're doing the best they can with the information they're presented, the evidence they're presented, but they're not there. So like the expert not being there seems like it's like a pretty selective exclusion, when that happens all the time.
And it never happens. I've never seen an expert have to be excluded. Like there's some kind of a party witness in the case. Like you're allowed to, you're supposed to exclude temporaneous, precipitous witnesses, but experts are a special category. They're only there to offer their expert opinions, and it's largely just based on facts and their evaluation. So excluding him was incorrect.
Could somebody even be considered an expert if they were a direct witness to something, if they were like a material witness to something?
No, that would be a different category. So if you were a direct witness to something, you were a percipient witness. And you're allowed to testify on what you saw, what you observed, what you experienced, etc. Right? But an expert is allowed to, if they were percipient, then great. But if they're also designated as an expert, they can go on into their conjecture about what certain things meant. Like, for example, what, in your opinion, would have been the source of 1,083 levies failing back in 1993? And he would have said, whatever he was going to say. And he's allowed to rely on whatever he would normally rely on in those circumstances. He can rely on the reports of others and attack them and critique them and say that that's not really dispositive because of they failed to consider this or they failed to consider that, or that's not really an industry-specific way of evaluating the evidence because they didn't take into consideration this other point of evaluation or whatever. That's what experts are supposed to be there to do. They're supposed to be there to educate and help the jury make informed decisions about what the evidence they've been presented means. So he gets up there, he does provide testimony under objection, and then the judge rules his entire examination hearsay. So he gives all of his opinions, and then it's just done. Jury never hears it. It's like it never happened.
Right. And then so they move on to talking about how the parole hearing is not about retrying the case. It's about determining if he's currently a threat to society or if he can be a productive, law-abiding citizen. Adam mentions here that he's not. Like, he has had no infractions in prison, been a model prisoner, I believe. He told me he was a manager, I think, in the prison panel factory. So he's, doing his job consistently. And then Adam also mentioned, he's not going to apologize. So that could be grounds to kick him back up.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of Hamner's notes from our last stream. 1,083 levies failures documented by the Army Corps in 1993. There's only one prosecutor. The levies were designed for about 30 days of flooding or loading, and they held for 90 days. I remember talking about that on the podcast with Adam. I was like, wait a minute. So it was knowledge that the levies were only supposed to hold for 30 days. Yeah. And they were holding for 90 days plus. That's exactly like the Palisades fire, not even hypothetical, the situation that occurred where they're supposed to change a part in the 60s, and they just never did. And then it held tried and true until 2020 when it failed. But they were supposed to swap it out. So the fact that it was rated for 30 days and it held for 90 days, that's not a James Scott issue. That's whoever was in charge of maintaining those levies issue. They're the ones that should be implicated in all this. Number one, whether it's criminal in nature is anybody's guess, but what it definitely is negligence that you usually see in civil cases brought against county government that is supposed to account for those kinds of things. And then it's up to the DAs to decide whether or not that rises to the level of criminal negligence or not. And so that was one of the things. He said 11 levies had failed upstream in the 10 days prior to the West Quincy incident. There was one that failed downstream a couple of days after. There was 13 in a row for 12 days. There were 12 specific different acts of God that led to a lot of the destructions. That's what was some of what Hamner was going to say. He had stated that there were 6. I think he said this on not the podcast, the Vice documentary, and Adam was on there, and he said that he brought out like this chart, this map. I wish I had it pulled up, but he said there was 6 site conditions that predict levee failure. 6. And then he said all 6 of them existed at the exact breach point. In other words, if there were people looking and paying attention, these 6 earmarkers for levee failure, they were all there, all of them, meaning we had to act immediately instead of whatever it is that they did. And I've been led to believe, just based on what I've read, and look, I've only had this case for like a week, but they were conducting aerial surveillance of the levees prior to the flood happening.
Right.
Because they probably knew that the things were going to friggin' fail.
Yeah.
And so here comes James Scott in this wayward throwaway line from this 16-year-old kid. Yeah, James said that he hopes that the levees fail because the flood will mean that he gets to party with us for a little bit longer. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Get the hell out of here with that.
Yeah.
That's what they say. And I mean, he said a lot of other stuff. I've given you basically the bare bones structure of what Hamner was arguing, but that's in essence what he was saying. And then just following the money. Number one, if it's an act of God, you're uninsured, right? That means federal flood insurance is stripped because acts of God you can't normally account for. However, vandalism or intentional acts of vandalism that would cause the levees to flood, that's covered by home insurance policies. Mm-hmm. And so you have 1,083 failures. Only one of them generated insurance recoveries. The only one with a convicted vandalism, James Scott. And then we talked about Norman Hayer. He was supposed to be the rock solid sabotage expert or whatever, the drainage district president, but he also happened to be the largest landowner behind the levee. And it was never disclosed to the jury that Norman Hayer, who was supposed to be the state's expert, happened to be the largest landowner behind the levees. It was never disclosed to the jury. In other words, his expert testimony was compromised, and he stood to financially benefit from James Scott's conviction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems like stuff that you'd want to hear in a closing argument. It seems like stuff that you'd want to be able to cross-examine him about. Whether or not they knew of that at the time, I don't know. But we know of it now. And it has led to where we stand, which is James Scott has been in prison for 33 years, and we'll see what happens with this parole hearing.
Well, let me circle back to the aircrafts for a minute, and I'm going to read part of this statement from Dr. Hammer. It's a Word document, so I don't know how to put it on the screen, so I'm just going to read it to you. That's why I moved the article off so people don't get confused, because what I'm about to read is not going to show. But he wrote that right here, I will add that when the court TV journalists preparing for their documentary submitted a FOIA to obtain the evidentiary films taken from the circling aircraft, the man who filmed the backside of the levee and the various news clips that clearly indicated that police and other officials had condemned James Scott before the first trial, the evidence was not available. It had disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
Oops. Disappeared evidence. Yeah. What are you going to do?
He also wrote here in his conclusion, the levee failure at Quincy was an inevitable natural disaster, particularly under the intensity and duration of the flood, the specific conditions at the site of the levee failure, and the deliberate harmful mismanagement of the levee after prolonged saturation. James Scott was a scapegoat, and the trial that convicted him was a sham and an embarrassment to the state of Missouri. I remain in complete disbelief of the dishonesty and nonsense I witnessed in the courtroom.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm a homeowner in Missouri and I'm hearing somebody say that, I mean, look, the natural disaster was foreseeable. It seems like the levee required maintenance that wasn't done. If I hear all of that and I'm a homeowner over there near one of the levees and I've lost my home, I'm not pissed off at James Scott. I'm pissed off at my government that's trying to scapegoat him and escape culpability because they don't want to take accountability.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who would you be pissed at?
I don't know, man.
This isn't even I mean, as conspiracy theories goes, to me, this isn't even a conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory is like, Lee Harvey Oswald, whatever, and the rifle in the building or whatever, they recovered it, and then he's murdered 3 days later, and there's like 20 different theories about how JFK was assassinated, whatever. Fine, but this one is like, no, if I just follow the evidence that exists that wasn't showed to the jury, in my opinion, as a lawyer, not as an engineer, but the person, if someone put this on my desk and say, go sue somebody, the last person on my list would be James Scott. I'd want to talk to the municipalities. I'd want to talk to municipal governments. I'd want to talk to the engineers that were responsible. I'd want to get a list of all of the people that were responsible for maintaining it. I'd want to look at all the maintenance logs. I'd want to look at the engineers' notes about what the levees were rated for, and what they knew at the time that the floods happened, what was done to prevent the disaster, what was done as it was happening, and what did they do afterwards. What evidence am I supposed to have access to when things like this happen, and how much of it has disappeared? I'd ask all of those questions and just objectively and point to where the evidence leads me. And I guarantee you that if I ask all of those questions and I get reasonable answers, it's not going to point to a singular man, James Scott, 24 years old at the time, trying to just live his life, doing whatever he was doing that night. I'll tell you what he wasn't doing. He wasn't vandalizing levees to the point where 1,038 of them failed, causing all of the destruction that they say happened. That's all.
Let me go back to Dr. Hammer's statement one more time here. And this kind of goes back to the Corps of Engineers and one of the employees that worked for them at the time. It says, in 2018, the 25th anniversary of the flood of 93, an independent reporter who had read Dr. Pitlock's book contacted me for an interview about the trial. And this is still Dr. Hammer's writing his statement. She also interviewed many of the witnesses for the prosecution, including a non-administrative COE employee during the trial, who subsequently had been retired from the COE for longer than a decade. He confessed to the reporter that he had been instructed to lie under oath about the levee conditions and had no idea that James Scott would be sentenced to life imprisonment for something he couldn't have done. He was haunted by this falsehood. I read the journalist's final report, which was published online, but have been unable to find it for this report. So I guess there have been people who talked to Adam, who, at least one juror who talked to Adam as well, who regretted the decision. There have been people who've come out over time who've recognized that this wasn't right.
I can't blame the jurors though, because they evaluated the evidence that was placed in front of them. Now look,
I don't think you could ever get me to, say someone should spend life in prison without any material evidence. I don't think you could do that.
That was the judge's decision. I mean, we heard him give his sentencing as he laid it down. And as I was listening, I knew nothing about the case, but I just heard him giving his sentence to James Scott. And he sounded like a guy that was sending somebody to life for like mass murder or something to that effect. But then you start to dig into the facts and it's like, wait a minute. So what was I even asked Adam, give me the state's best evidence. And then he said something. I don't even remember what he said because it was just like, it was so anticlimactic. Okay, that's not what I was looking for. I'm looking for like smoking gun, like he took a hammer to the levee, or he had this plot, or he had something sketched up in his den somewhere about how he was going to vandalize the levees so that he could party a couple hours longer with his friends and his wife wouldn't be able to say anything about it. Something to that effect. I mean, that's literally the motive, right? But I didn't see any of those things. And so I can't pretend that I don't know what I know. I can't pretend that 1,038 levees failing is almost never the fault of one person. Maybe one time in history where damage on that scale was the fault of one person and didn't necessarily implicate those responsible for the infrastructure, namely the government that was commissioned with such a task.
Right.
I mean, you go back to the Roman Empire. If this happened in the Roman Empire, they're not looking for one singular gladiator. They're going to figure out, what council members were responsible for installing the aqueduct, what they knew about the potential failures of the aqueduct, and when it failed, they would stone them to death.
What?
They did things a little differently a couple thousand years ago.
Okay.
Medieval, that's pre-medieval. I'm just saying they would not be looking for a James Scott. They would be looking for the people that built it and were responsible for maintaining it. That's all.
Right. It just sounds like there's enough doubt to me that this never should have happened. So, but there's nothing that you can do to go back in time and stop that from happening. He's been in there 33 years. The best case scenario is that he gets to live the rest of his life now outside of prison. So,
well, let's talk about all the things that he's lost. I mean, he had a mother he would communicate with pretty much on a daily basis, is my understanding.
Yeah.
And she was on the Vice documentary, and she spoke of him about what he was like as a child. You know, he was a good kid. He was a normal kid. And even after he was convicted, she would keep daily contact with him. James would call her, and she's since passed away. He doesn't have any family. He has no living family. His best friend right now is probably Adam Pitlick. He's the guy that was sitting with him in his parole hearing this morning. And what's frustrating to me is this, and it's the title of my stream, which is, look, all he's got to do is say sorry and they'll let him out. Number one, I'm not even so sure that that's true. Like, what if he were to say, you know what? All right, I'm sorry. I did it. I'm guilty. I've learned so many things over the last 33 years, and one of them is that I'm guilty, and I have the ultimate remorse. I'll never be able to forget that day. I wish I could go back in time. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. I sit here as a condemned man, yearning for the mercy of this parole board in the hopes that I might be given a second chance and do something positive with my life. If he gave some kind of remorseful statement like that, I'm not even certain, given the location of where he's at, that would be enough to let him out. However, it's certainly one of the factors. And one of the things that sucks about these kinds of convictions is when a conviction is recorded, meaning there's been a jury trial and a verdict, you no longer get to meritoriously make the argument that he's not guilty. Whenever you approach the appeals board, whenever you approach the sentencing judge, you can't just say, look, Your Honor, I don't know what to tell you. They found me guilty, but I'm innocent. You don't get to say that. Because no, I understand that's what you think, but you were guilty. And they can say it as if it's fact, and they don't give a shit about your questions. They don't give a shit about what the jury heard or didn't hear. They didn't care about, whatever your appellate avenues are, how you're going to continue to fight the case. They want to see you've now been convicted by a jury of your peers. Under the laws of our state, you are now a convicted felon, and I need to sentence you. And if you're going to come in my courtroom and say that you're not guilty, well, then you know what? You're getting the max.
You see that with a lot of people, especially people who are thefinitely guilty.
There's that one famous example.
Yeah.
I forget. I don't know the guy's name, but he's like this guy. He's got like a tatted up face. I think he was accused or convicted of basically murdering a baby.
Was that about Wade Wilson?
No, not that guy. It was a different guy. But he says something like, look, Your Honor, I didn't do it. I was abused as a child. I know what abuse looks like. I would never do what they've accused me of doing to a baby. I would never do it. And then the judge is like, all right, well, I'm not going to argue with you, but let me tell you this. Let me ask you this. What do you think ought to happen to the person that actually did these things to this baby? And then he's like, well, I think you should put him under the prison. It's like, oh, so I should give him the max sentence, right? It's like, absolutely. Well, then I sentence you to the max. And that was it.
That's one way to help yourself along.
Yeah. But that's not James Scott's case, though. James Scott has a legitimate gripe with the way that his case was handled. I don't want to talk negative about attorneys that I've never met because I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what their strategies were. And I've been doing this long enough to know that, look, this is hard work. And so I'm not going to impugn any attorneys that I've never spoken with to understand their strategies or what their thinking was. But it really bothers me. It really bothers me that they never addressed in appellate court the expert witness thing.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that was the strongest basis for appeal. We literally had a witness, an expert witness, who had his testimony kicked out on the basis of hearsay that normally applies to laypersons. That is a mistake of law. That means the judge got that objection wrong on the law. That means necessarily that evidence, hadn't he gotten the law correctly, would have come in. And had that evidence come in, and this expert witness would have testified to the fact that, look, there were 6 markers of levee failure that we look for to see if something's going to hold up or not. All 6 of those conditions were present before the levees failed. These people had knowledge of all, or should have had knowledge of all of those conditions, and the levee's failure and subsequent damage should not be attributed to one man, James Scott. It should be attributed to all of these people.
Yeah.
These engineers, these municipalities, the local government, the state government, whatever, because this was a catastrophic failure of infrastructure that could have been prevented, but for Missouri's failure to keep up with the levees. Mm-hmm. Had they done that, it didn't matter what James Scott did. He could have taken a bulldozer to one of those levees, and 1,038 of them weren't going to flood.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have failed. And if the jury would have known that and had that evidence to evaluate, they never would have convicted James Scott.
Right.
Now, I don't even understand what they actually brought up on appeal, but I just know that they lost. And there's no more. It makes no point. There's no point in me even raising the issue because his appellate options are essentially dead.
Yeah.
Unless they find.
I need to find out if there's a way to access that stuff. You know what I mean? It's not like 33 years ago or so. It's not like today where you can go on the internet and look at e-filings. You know, I'd have to track it down.
Yeah, e-filings, transcripts of Hamner's testimony. I'm really curious about. I'm sincerely doubtful that let's just say that the courthouse in Missouri had a pressing interest in convicting this man because they were all in cahoots. Let's just say that, right? Assuming arguendo, that's what they were doing. If that's the case, and you have a judge that's willing to make those kinds of objections and keep out Hamner's testimony, and you have a prosecutor that's willing to hide evidence so that we can get James Scott convicted, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that you're not going to recover those things.
Right.
But hey, might as well give the old college try.
There is, court TV footage of all this trial out there somewhere, and I have somebody I can call to see it because I think she may know how to get it. Because I don't think it's on like YouTube or anything like that because this was a long time ago. But somewhere out there is some court TV footage of this case. So
yeah, well, court TV was like in its infancy back in '93. It would have been like I mean, literally, court TV didn't really become a legitimate thing until OJ. So it was around that time. But if you got the inroads to get all that stuff, then hell, why not? Why not? Just assuming that this isn't going to resolve itself this morning as a result of this morning's parole hearing, might as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they'll still be making the film and then telling his story regardless of what happens today. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot to see.
I'm telling you, man, look, this is like the story. Number one, this story is so infuriating. And it's not the kind of story that gets like these big headlines, but it should be. Right. Because come on, man. I mean, just this 24-year-old kid convicted off of that. I mean, this is like the most egregious case of I don't want to say judicial misconduct, judicial error. How about that? Yeah. Prosecutorial misconduct, that's already been a finding. I don't know a lot about Missouri. Mm-hmm. But the things that I've heard about Missouri and their legal system, I've heard nothing but bad things. I have heard about Missouri that, you're not going to get if you're looking for justice in Missouri, then go elsewhere because everybody is in this club. And if you ain't in the club and they want to erase you, you will be erased. Yeah. And that goes from the criminal courts all the way down to the dependency courts, all the way down to the family courts. I'm telling, look, and I'm not suggesting that they are definitely corrupt. I'm just saying it seems like all of the stories that seem to come out of Missouri tend to involve corruption, way more so than any other state that I've ever covered. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll end on this for today. Blake texted me and said that he only spoke to Adam quickly, so we don't have a lot of details, and I don't want to say too much because I know they'll want to talk about it, but apparently it went surprisingly well, so that's good.
Well, that's encouraging. We'll see what happens. Yeah. We're not going to get a decision on that today. It might be a few weeks before. I mean, however long they take, but I'd imagine
2 to 6 weeks or even longer.
Yeah, 2 to 6 weeks is about right.
All right, guys. I gotta get back to work. Unfortunately, I'm still on the clock, so I just wanted to do this on my lunch break. But
well, now that my lunch break, I never take a lunch break, but I did today for this for James Scott. Yeah. How about that?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
All right. Well, I'll let you get back to it then. I'm going to get back to doing my lawyer thing. Oh, actually, I have another stream I'm doing this afternoon.
Oh, me too.
about that lady
After
that
work.
killed her kids. What was her name?
Mine is not about that.
Oh, well, yeah. It's a big
I think I know
streaming
what you're
day for
talking
me.
about, though. I forgot her name too, dude, because I just learned about that this week.
I just had my brain completely empty, but it was I've covered this case like a couple years ago. They just started trial, and I wanted to talk about it again. But anyway, I'm going to be doing that a little bit later on. And as far as you, well, you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, that's all good.
Late
All right.
and gay.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. And we'll see you all soon. Don't forget to hit the like button for us. Helps us out a lot. And feel free to share so more people get to hear about James' story. So, all right. Thanks.
All right, folks. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.